time. Yeah. Come on and up here.
By the way, these are excerpts of these two films. They're not the entire film. So if you donated $10 or more and became a new or renewed member, pick up one of our DVDs, because then you can see the whole thing.
While I'm fiddling around up here, hoping it comes on, credit to Andy Wright for editing these two films.
Okay, here we go, Billy.
Suburbs, almost as much written about as Madison Avenue, and just as much in need of reflection. Like Madison Avenue, life in the suburbs has its good moments and others not so good.
Oh, no!
Oh. Discouraged? Disgruntled? Heck no. They're glad to be here. It takes a while for a young couple to realize all they're in for when they buy a house or when they have a baby. And when they buy a house and have a baby. So hardly realizing it, they come into their purchasing stage and are off on a wild, non-stop ride. It's a happy-go-spending world, reflected in the windows of the suburban shopping centers where they go to buy. The shopping centers see these young adults as people whose homes are always in need of expansion. People who buy in large quantities and truck it away in their cars. It's a big market. These young adults, shopping with the same determination that led them to the suburbs in the first place, are the goingest part of a nation on wheels, living by the automobile. The first young adults in the age of the push button.
Americans, by and large, love Suburbia. It has promised space, affordability, convenience, family life, and upward mobility. After half a century of constant development, more than half our population has moved here. And as the population of suburban sprawl has exploded, so too the suburban way of life has become embedded in the American consciousness. Suburbia and all it promises has become the American dream. But as we enter the 21st century, serious questions are emerging about the sustainability of this way of life. Does the suburban dream have a future?
The whole suburban project, I think, can be summarized pretty succinctly as the greatest misallocation of resources in the history of the world. America took all of its post-war wealth and invested it in a living arrangement that has no future.
The basic cause of it all is the end of cheap and abundant energy.
Cheap oil is the party that we've been enjoying for the past 150 years. And that party is coming to an end. Within our lifetimes, we're going to see the end of the age of oil. And the result of that will be the end of the American way of life.
Here, in a typical North American suburb, life seems to be carrying on much as it has for the past 50 years. With every passing year, more and more streets like this one replace farmers' fields as more and more people come here for their share of the good life. History, however, has proven itself indifferent to people's hopes and dreams for a better life. Even the best of intentions have often not been enough to avoid calamity. And suburbia began with the best of intentions.
The dream of the suburbs was the antidote to city life, and in particular, the life of the industrial city and the industrial town. And the antidote was going to be country living for everybody. And the suburbs was a way of delivering that to the masses. The industrial city and the industrial town were really things that had never been seen before. You know, they were new. Human beings didn't have experience with them and with all the terrible things that they produced. So, you know, the towns and cities of North America grew up in tandem with the industrial processes and were very much products of industrialism. And what happens pretty early in the process, by the mid-19th century, is that the industrial city becomes a fairly horrible place. There's all this noise and effluence and pollution and stenches and all these terrible byproducts of factories, and people don't want to live around that stuff anymore. And then you get the additional problems of, you know, you need armies of workers to toil in these factories which are assuming increasingly immense scale. The quarters that they live in end up being these vast tenement slums. You know, this idea establishes itself in, I think, the collective consciousness of all of us North Americans that the city's not really a very good place to live. And what is the alternative? Well, there's the city and there's the country. Certainly the first suburbs in the late 19th century enabled the better off upper middle class to get away from these moiling and toiling workers and all their vulgar worker culture of the cities. In the 1870s and 80s and 90s, you get the first template, which is the suburb based on the idea of the manor in a park, you know, the estate in a park. And these are subdivisions like Llewellyn Park in New Jersey and Riverside, 9 miles outside the Chicago Loop, which are basically large Victorian villas deployed in a park-like setting. You know, in the beginning, there must have been elements of it that were lovely, because the first people who were moving out there were pretty well off. And they were moving to real countryside. There were no Kmarts in 1897. Then in the late 19th, early 20th century, before World War I, you get something quite different. You get the streetcar suburb, which is based on this idea of the streetcar lines now leaving the city, and these new suburbs, which are still fairly civic in their physical design.
And there were these stops, and each one of these stops created a beautiful little main street and smaller, higher density housing, cottages, bungalows nearby, all very walkable in the most traditional sense.
And they are some of the most wonderful neighborhoods in America. They're just outside the central cities. Then what happens is in the 1920s, you get the mass motoring democratization of suburbia. And that results in the boom of the 1920s, largely based on creating these automobile suburbs and all of their furnishings and accessories. And that project is interrupted by the Great Depression and the Second World War.
No, sir. All this can't keep a fella from putting down his ideas. Something is going to add up here. His own air-conditioned castle with a deep freeze. Cooler for beer. Great big lawn where Bet and Pubsy will welcome him home. Veterans Emergency Housing Program is launched to help solve the housing emergency in hundreds of cities. The target, 2,700,000 homes and apartments started by the end of 1947.
This is the payoff to our soldiers who fought in World War II. You get to come home. You don't have to live in a city anymore. You can live in a brand new home in the suburbs, and you're going to have a wife who can stay at home and a family, and that's the payout. And that became a packaged American dream, but it's only a post-World War II American dream. It's not the true American dream of anybody can make it.
Almost overnight, Suburbia was born. 500,000 homes sprang up around the country in 1946. Nearly 1 million in 1947. 1 million in 1948. Still more in 1949, 1950. The empty farmlands, the quiet towns and villages surrounding the city found themselves in the midst of a roaring housing boom.
You get the real full elaboration of the automobile suburb based on the idea of the cul-de-sac subdivision, and that becomes the template for how we're going to build things. This is the only part of the world at that time where, you know, plumbers and pipe fitters and sheetrock hangers could own their own home. The middle class is going to go basically from the wino level clear up to, you know, the doctors and the dentists. And everybody will be included.
You'll find a scene like this in nearly every village, town, and city throughout the country. For in the hopes and dreams of everyone, there's a home they can call their own. Home brings a sense of security to a man. And to every woman, her home means a setting for gracious living.
And we'll have the living room right in here. And the kitchen right here so we can see the children playing in the yard. And we have shrubbery, of course, right along in here. And, oh, darling, it's going to be just perfect.
One of the things that happens is that Suburbia ends up being a false promise. The post-war Suburbia is not what it promises to be. It's not country living. It's a cartoon of country living and a cartoon of a house. You know, it has none of the real amenities of country life, no connection with real organic systems of other living things, you know, rivers, forests, fields, agriculture, none of that. You know, you just get a lawn, you know, which is an industrial produced artifact. So it has none of the amenities of country life, and it has none of the amenities of the town. And in fact, it has all the disadvantages of both. You know, all you really have is a 6-lane highway.
And so it is that all of us in interdependence live independently on wheels.
The idea is that everybody's going to live in a country house. And one of the results of that is that the American cities and towns are absolutely gutted in the period of 1950s, 60s, and 70s.
Increasingly, we are seeing large-scale demolition as the first step in building modern cities. Getting needed space in our cities for modern structures is the only way to meet the competitive force of growing suburban strength. Often, the substance of our urban structures is such as to resist the power of the demolition hammer. From now on, we shall be seeing much demolition, the first step in making our cities better places to work, better places to live. It will take great effort and real leadership, but as a people, we can do the jobs. And as we see here the rubble of demolition at the feet of Columbus, let us remember that in many ways the continent is still before us.
The American city is decanted into the countryside, and all of its functions soon follow. The shopping, the office, the retail, everything follows.
As growing numbers of North Americans moved to the suburbs, one of the challenges facing policymakers was how to get all these people from their homes to their shopping malls, to their workplaces, and their schools, and back again. The major American auto manufacturers were powerhouses of industrial might following the Second World War, and they had a plan for the masses. It relied, not surprisingly, on cars as America's future mass transit.
The growth of suburbs has brought another major problem: getting there and back. Without cars, suburbia wouldn't be possible. But once we live in suburbia, even where there are trains and buses serving the suburbs, most people have to depend on cars. Each year there are more of them. each year there must be more highways and expressways to take care of them.
Originally, the suburbs were places that developers actually paid for light rail systems and streetcars to go to in order to make the land viable, places to live. GM and Firestone and I think Standard Oil were actually convicted of conspiring to destroy the light rail systems across the United States. They literally bought them up and tore them out so that they could sell GM buses with Firestone wheels run with Standard Oil. Simultaneously, you had the Federal Highway Program.
A Better Highways contest was recently conducted. Purpose? Arouse nationwide thinking on how to plan and pay for the safe and adequate highways we need. Highway experts wrote essays.
I am privileged to present the winner of the Grand National Award, Robert Moses of New York.
Robert Moses, New York City construction coordinator, is a world-famous highway planner, a man who knows his business.
No magic will suddenly produce roads commensurate with cars. The remedies are neither easy nor cheap nor immediately realizable. But the task you have set is not beyond the capacity of the aroused American people.
Will you stop honking, Mac? We ain't going nowhere. You think you got it made. Good job, car nearly paid for. So you get a little home in the suburbs, away from the city smoke, out from the shadows of the factory. Raise a few kids, some flowers and vegetables. The big dream coming true.
There is this specific American dream that got packaged and sold and subsidized, highly, highly subsidized. So subsidized that to continue it, it is a deep question of whether we can afford to continue that level of subsidy, and it is unsustainable.
The interstate highways have become continuous bands of suburban development. You could go from Maine to Florida on Interstate 95 and never see open countryside. It's become a continuous city. And the density of population in those areas is extremely low. It's not economic to build railroads, or even bus lines are uneconomic in those vast areas of sprawl because population density is so low. The only efficient way to travel is by individual automobile. Distances people drive are quite considerable. 50, 100 miles a day is not unusual for commuters who live in these outer suburban areas. Every county within 50 miles of an interstate highway has shown population growth, and every county outside 50 miles of an interstate highway has declined. This is essentially completely going in the wrong direction.
The suburbs wouldn't exist if it weren't for cheap oil. The U.S. is a car culture. The automobile industry started in the U.S., and really the automobile industry got its start here because we were looking for ways to use that cheap oil. The U.S. was awash in oil in the early 20th century. In the 1930s, they were discovering the stuff so fast that oil in Texas was cheaper than drinking water by the carload. The car companies quickly became the engine driving U.S. industry and economic growth. The result of this is that we have created this new system of habitation where people live miles and miles from where they work and from where they get their food and all of their other necessities, based on the idea that they can and they must hop in their car at any moment and travel miles and miles. And the only way that works is on the basis of cheap energy.
Now we're stuck up a cul-de-sac in a cement SUV with an empty gas tank.
20 years from now, there will still be oil in the ground. 200 years from now, somebody somewhere will still be pumping it. But soon, within our lifetimes, the growing energy demands of the American dream here in suburbia will eclipse our planet's ability to provide it. Will we learn to dream of something better for the world to come?
Suburbia started out as this impulse to flee from the city, and it was a pretty successful thing for what it was during the time that we were able to do it, namely the oil age. It had a good, 7-decade run.
2 or 3 centuries from now, people will be looking back and formulating myths about the way people lived back then in that. Whether they'll look at it as a lost golden age or an age of horrors and insanity, I'm not sure. I think it may be the latter. They'll look back on us and they'll say, my God, who were those people? How could they be so stupid?
Irony was the ethos of the late 20th century. But as we move into the 21st century, we're going to discover that irony is a luxury we can't afford anymore. This stuff isn't just funny. Our lives are going to depend on whether we have an environment that's worth living in and that can actually support the project of civilization. We're not just going to be able to sit back and make fun of it anymore and enjoy it ironically. That part of our history is over. It's time to get serious.
But right now, you can ride along with the happy go spending. Buy it now, young adults of today.
This is the American dream of freedom on wheels. An automotive age, traveling on time-saving superhighways. Futurama's free-flowing channels of concrete and steel.
Sounds fantastic, doesn't it? Through the invention of better things, we think you'll agree there is no end to progress now or in century 21.
Prices have spiked over the past few months. China's a relatively new player on the field. It affects you every time you drive your SUV. The U.S. protects the Saudi royals. The oil continues. Some experts very worried.
A Texas company is buying a major Canadian firm with interest in the Alberta oil sands.
China wants more and more world oil.
Someone driving through Suburbia should take a good look around, record the memory, because we may never see anything like it again. The realities coming down at us in the 21st century really are that we're going to have to scale down virtually all the daily activities that go into everyday life. The way we do business, the way we do farming, the way we travel, the kind of habitations that we make for ourselves, and that's going to come as a great shock to America. The expectation through really most of American history has always been there will always be more. There'll always be more land, there'll always be more wealth, there'll always be more business, and finally, that there will be more energy.
We have a serious problem. America is addicted to oil.
The whole American story and the industrial story are jointly bumping up against this new wall of limits that really they can't cope with.
Willits is a small city. It's a population of about 5,000. For many years, Willits has been like every other city in the world, I guess, or in the country. We do what's been done.
We've gone from a logging community and manufacturing basically to a services community.
We were always the stepchild of other folks that were trying to get through us to go somewhere else, and we learned to be self-reliant.
So it was a perfect marriage when the end of Suburbia came to Willits and brought many of us together. And not only has it formed new friendships, but it's given a complete new focus to the community that many of us are rallying behind.
Well, this thing started about a little over a year ago, and at that point it was a question as to whether this was even a story we were going to cover. It was a group of young idealists coming in and talking a lot of talk that nobody had ever heard before.
We'd be hard-pressed to get a group of 6 people in Willits to agree on anything politically.
I think one thing we do agree on is that our community is really special to us, and we need to preserve, we need to protect it, and we need to look out for one another.
Many people in this community can sit down in the same room and not talk about Iraq and not talk about the Patriot Act, but they can talk about Willits and they can talk about what we're doing to prepare ourselves.
We get together forums of different sections of the community and their opinion leaders, and we talk to them not about the threat of peak oil, but about the opportunity.
As we set up this vision for a sustainable, localized economy that really provides these basic needs for us: food, energy, shelter, water, transportation.
You had the city involved, you started to get the school board involved, you started to get the Chamber of Commerce involved.
The opportunity is to become strong and healthy in our locality, and then encourage other localities to do the same.
A person who can observe trends will certainly come to the same conclusion that the Willits economic localization folks have, that the current system is not viable over the long run.
You hate to say that a crisis is bringing people together, but that's exactly what I see this becoming, because Americans have a tendency to lull into comfort and not progress. And I think that that's not the way we need to be now. We need to be very proactive.
A lot of what this is about is really sort of participatory democracy. This is something that's been really missing in politics for a long time. Studies have shown that good decisions come out of not sort of experts telling people what to do, but out of the people interacting with knowledgeable experts, deciding what the best course is for them.
If this is what our problem is, and we think this is what our solution is, then how are we going to travel the road?
Can we do something ahead of time? Can we do it collectively? Can we do it as a community? That's what democracy is all about.
Economies are going to have to be localized more and really become more of a partner with their local environment to provide what they need and hopefully not damage it in the process.
The bank as a private institution is perfect to help in that regard, because if you don't get the cash from the government, you can get the cash from your fellow residents who put it in here in deposits.
The other big movement that happened energy-wise was the city formally set up what's called an ad hoc energy committee. And they looked at the city's energy use primarily with electricity.
And the city government basically solarized the pumping stations at their sewer plant.
What we're planning is to convert city facilities to solar energy. It has to be not only environmentally sound and friendly, it has to be financially and economically smart.
The revolution in energy is very much like the internet. We can download energy from the grid. We can also upload energy from our energy producers.
It's a lot more than self-sufficiency. It's about really becoming responsible for one's lifestyle.
There are many communities out in the United States and across the world now doing the same thing. In other words, the paradigm shift we're talking about is moving from this command and control notion of what an economy is and what political life is about, to bringing it back to where it's real, which is where people live.
When all this started, I said the only way to keep the place together would be if there's enough food to feed the community. That's it. If we have enough food, we can weather anything.
Whether or not our soils will support the food and fiber that we need for our 13,000 people in this greater trading area is unknown because we've never tried it. But I'm willing to link arms with those who want to have a bash at it and move forward.
The opportunity is to just go forward and continue to create ourselves and in the way we want to be, in the vision of our biggest, most fulfilling self.
It's exciting to be able to cover this story for a number of reasons. One is that it's very big and it has implications beyond the Willits area, and it's also very positive. I can't think of one person who stood up and said, this is nonsense, let's not do it. Every time I go to write, everybody's saying, let's go, and can we go a little faster?
I can bemoan the fact that, oh, we should have started 5 years ago. We should have started 50 years ago. It doesn't matter. You need to start. That's the biggest hurdle.
We all agree that this is the right thing, the right time, and the right place.
Try to pull off a miracle and Skype Jason Bradford right now. Let's see, match. Yes. Do you want to just say a little quickie while I do this technical thing?
As the timekeeper here, we are a little behind schedule, so we're going to keep moving along. One of the things I'm remembering now, it was a long time ago when I saw this film first, just about 10 years ago. I remember feeling like some of these global issues, primarily they were talking about peak oil. Now we realize even if there was plenty of oil, we better not keep burning it because we have climate change. So that's the new crisis that we have at the global level, and there's not a whole lot that I can do and most of us can do at the global level. I mean, keep engaged, do all that stuff. But locally, it's really exciting. And not only is it something you can wrap your brains around and get going on, but you get to work with your friends and neighbors. So that's one of the reasons that I've been able to keep putting energy into WELL. And I hope if any of you are not current members, and if you have, even if you're a current member but haven't renewed for 2015, please do. We could use all the support. You don't have to do much more than just join, but if you can do more than that, that would be even better. We have some vacancies on the coordinating committee. We have the potential for many spin-off groups, which you'll see in a while. I visited with the Bradfords up in Corvallis this summer, and they are thriving up there. They really, and Jason's doing a lot of incredible work. It was really great to see all of them just keeping on with their mission in improving the world wherever they are in their local community.
How about if David Drell come up for a brief moment? So David and I have differing memories of the very first time we met Jason Bradford and the October 14th meeting at the WEC. I remember that there was a movie shown and David says there wasn't. Who else was at that meeting at the WEC, October 14th, 2004? Okay,
all
so
right.
we can just beat each other up and be right.
It's Annie and me. This is like going to your high school reunion. It's pretty frightening. I see Lanny Kotler, of course, Brian Korzilius, who together with me chaired the Energy Transportation Group. But I see Diane Smalley. I see, well, of course, Annie, Richard Jurgensen. I mean, when Jason Bradford came to town, he was a He was a PhD. He had done research on the effect of climate change on plants in the Andes. And he was in a deep depression because he understood that, in fact, climate change was what was going to bring down human civilization as we knew it. And then he learned about peak oil, and he thought, it was very clear to him that human beings on their own would not cease to use carbon and oil, but if, in fact, oil was peaking, and just by the fact that the resource was declining, that we might survive that way. So peak oil gave Jason hope. It wasn't that that first we learned about peak oil and then climate change. No, he came here as a depressed academic, but peak oil gave him hope. And he came to me at the Willits Environmental Center. He said, I have this message I want to communicate to this community. How can I do it? I don't know anyone. And I said, you're the new pretty face in town. You're going to do it yourself. I'm going to help you make it happen. I called up a bunch of people to come to a talk that we didn't have End of Suburbia yet. And there was probably, 25 people that came to that talk. But the Environmental Center was packed. You couldn't get too many people into it. And Jason was happy, and his depression was slightly lifted. And he said, well, what should we do now? And I said, we need to expand the group. And it was there that we began to show End of Suburbia. And
how many came to the End of Suburbia showings? The early, you've seen it at least once before. Hey, Jason! You see the whole room, Jason?
Jason? Oh yeah, it's at the Grange. Jason Bradford, this is your life.
Yeah.
The Grange has fans.
RJ did that.
You got to come to the Grange, Jason. It's beautiful here.
And pews.
And pews, yes. We're churchifying. Okay, so David Drell just laid out a few things. Let's see if you agree with Jason. Tell us something. Tell us what you're doing now briefly, and then tell us what you remember, or vice versa, of Willits, this place. We just saw End of Suburbia and Escape from Suburbia 8-minute segment.
Okay. So what I'm doing now is I'm pretty scattered, doing a lot of things. Like I just got back from working with some Oregon State students and a local watershed council to plant. Well, we planted trees, but we were trying to weed around trees that were planted in a riparian zone at one of the properties that my company's fund bought. The first farm we purchased had a pretty bad forest along the riparian strip. So we got a grant and have been working ever since for 4 years now. And before that, I was working on selling seeds that were harvested. I was working on making sure that there was a pasture blend to be sent to California for land there, and also to plant out on some fields in Oregon that we were getting prepped for planting right now. I'm going to go visit another farm that we're got a purchase agreement on tomorrow morning. So I was talking to the guy that is managing that. I was working on geographic information system stuff with another employee who is really good at this, named Rob Dietz. And all kinds of stuff, accounting stuff, spreadsheets, human resource management, long-term planning, making through the day.
How many chickens do you have, Jason?
So one of the farms in Oregon here, which is where my office is, has 8,000 hens on it right now.
All right. Woo.
Yeah.
Madge.
What did I show you, Madge, when you were here?
You showed me where you're about to build your new house for your family.
Oh, so you saw that one farm there real quick.
And that beautiful farm. And you gave some acreages of areas that you have bought and converted to organic farming. Just want to tell us what those are? Rough numbers.
The land that my company bought is about 1,500 acres in the Corvallis area. and then we lease about another 100 acres. And then in California, we have about 5,800 acres in the delta, the edge of the delta, north of Tracy and east of Brentwood. You know, we're working on doubling that in a year.
Woo! Wow.
And about 1,000 acres right now is certified organic.
Great.
So I'm busy. I haven't stopped working.
Who's doing the labor on those farms, Jason?
Well, you could think of me as as a property manager more than anything, and so most of what I do is I work on leases and long-term management and stewardship. So I've got 22 different tenants on those 7,000 acres, and some of them are really small, like a few acres. Some of them are like renting a house. They may be an old-time resident. And then some of them are really large farmers that may, lease 2,000 acres from us. So it runs the whole gamut. And so a lot of what I do is figure out from year to year or season to season what our plans are and who's going to be leasing what field. And the general program is that we'll buy a property and then I'll plant it into a pasture. And it's a really diverse pasture, grasses, clovers, various forbs. And then if I plant a pasture in the fall, it's usually 5 or 6 months until we can graze it. And then we might be grazing it for about 4 to 6 years, and then it will rotate into crops. It takes 3 years typically from once we plant a pasture until it's certified organic. And then we can rotate organic crops on. So organic crops we have are, we have a butternut squash. We have a lot of clover seed. We have grass seed. We have small grains, oats, and some legumes like peas, green peas, cover crop legumes, fava beans. And so I'm a little bit more involved here in Oregon on doing some creative stuff with how to integrate livestock and crop production together. In California, it's more distinct. There's like grazing, and then there's the conventional farmers, and we're moving grazing land into conventional farmland, and we haven't quite come around to the organic crops yet because those are more recent purchases. But in Oregon, where it's certified organic, and I've got these livestock programs going, I can actually use the livestock to cut down on fertilizer needs and weed pressure, and it's been working pretty well this year for that.
Do you have a lot of young farmers? What's the average age of the new farmer coming in?
It runs the gamut. I mean, there are so most people you think of farmers are working for a company, a business that is hiring them. So most of the young people you see are farm hands, you would say. So they're hired, and they might be 18, they might be 24, and they're given a job and they're given duties, and someone is managing them. So most of the young people are not independent business people. Sometimes you have pretty young people in their 30s who've taken that on, and I have some small farmers that are in that situation. And then there's people also do livestock, ranch hands, that kind of thing, cowboys, shepherds, and then there's some. I've got a guy I leased who's 93. So.
Hi, Jason. Bill here. I'm happy to report that Brookside Farm is up and flourishing under the able guidance of Amanda and Luke. So you'd be very pleased to see how beautiful it looks over there. And I know thousands of hours you put into that place.
Yeah, no, I miss that place. It was gorgeous. The big madrone. I remember the big madrone tree in the back by the processing area, and that was beautiful with bloom, and I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's great. The other thing is just very quickly, how are Kristen and the boys, and could you give us just a brief update on them too?
Well, the boys are gigantic. They're in high school, 15 and a half. It'll be 16 this February, and Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're a handful. They're very sweet still, so it's this weird thing where they're still sweet kids, and they're acting like teenagers, and they go back and forth. And Kristen is a medical director for the county clinic here. She's working really hard, very dedicated, and she's got 4 clinics in 2 counties, Benton and Lynn County, which are sort of central Willamette Valley here. It includes Corvallis and Albany and Lebanon, those towns. So yeah, we're doing well. Miss you guys. I see a lot of faces. Great.
Let's give Jason a round of applause.
Thank you, Jason.
We're going to hang up and eat cake. We're sorry you can't be here.
Oh, sounds delicious. All right. Bye.
Bye, Jason.
Bye.
This is just a kind of, again, a fast overview of what we've been trying to do localizing here in Willits. That's our mission statement, our vision. Okay, so this is something that our mayor has said about us, that we're not just talking about it, we're trying to actually move in the right direction of the concrete steps, but not real concrete, or more, edible landscape is much better. And by the way, Holly Madrigal has been very active in Will. She's been on the coordinating committee for about 3 years. Our challenges, we've talked about already a little bit about climate change, obviously, the instability of our economy nationally and globally, the rising fuel costs, uncertain supply, being dependent on imported goods, and the loss of jobs here locally, inadequate resources or potential emergencies. So these are all things that make us vulnerable here at the local level. And this is an illustration of how we're dependent on oil and food and everything from far, far away. And this is how it makes me feel, is what I said earlier. There's not that much I can do about it. So sometimes I just want to close my eyes and my ears and say, that global issue is just too big. But I really take heart from what Howard Zinn said, which is that if we live the way we think human beings should be living, that in itself, despite whatever else happens out there, is a victory, and it makes me feel good. And so let's do it. Ride your bike. So some of the benefits of localizing, I'm going to go really fast on this. Local employment, efficient options for food and energy and transportation, more secure future for our families, and connections within our community with each other and the beauty around us. And we're lucky here in Willits because we have those people around us and this beauty around us. This is an illustration of the alternative of trying to live within our resources locally. So a very brief history. We've talked about how we began in October of 2004. We've held dozens of programs with speakers and many hands-on kinds of workshops. We've hosted regional localization conferences, and we've also provided grant funds and other sponsorships for many, many local projects. This is just a sampling, well, it's a fairly good sampling of some of the guest speakers we've had over the 10 years. Some of these came from pretty far away, and some of them are our local heroes. So won't go into all of those, but it's been pretty impressive. One of the things that Well does is we don't try to do everything ourselves. We try to be a clearinghouse and a support to anything going on in the community that helps localization. So we serve as a clearinghouse, we publicize, we provide education, we try to connect people with the issues that they're interested in. We do provide some funding and sponsorships, and often our members are volunteers in various projects. These are a smattering of the food-related projects that have been going on at least in the last 10 years. A few of these may have even started before that. We're going to illustrate just a couple of them: the home gardens, the community kitchen here at the Grange, our farmers markets, and our local farm tours. So here is just a few of the home gardens. We've got lots more home gardens now by, I don't even know the numbers, but compared to 10 years ago. We have a community kitchen here at the Grange that, and also the silos out here, which helps us be more food independent. The Grange is a fabulous organization, and it's kind of in a way, a sister organization to Well. We work together very often and co-sponsor things. We now have year-round farmers market, thanks to Michael Foley and many others, and we love to support that. We have had an annual farm tour, I think almost every year except one, so probably 8 of them. That's been really fun to educate people and celebrate our local farmers. Non-food related or tangential perhaps, but anyway, these are other kinds of projects that include transportation, water, energy, job creation, and further education. The walks, Wowzer is up and running. Kinetic Carnival is exciting now. The town hall meetings have taken on a lot of the education that some of which Well used to do, and we again consider that sister organizations. The Wet Walks, these films every month, the Now and Then films, etc. There was our bike show and parade from 2 years ago. We're going to probably do that again next year and try to make it an annual event. It was a lot of fun. Things are going on in the downtown. This is just one illustration from one person. But right now, the merchants groups and the Chamber of Commerce and City are working on getting a grant to plan for improving our downtown Main Street, especially planning for post-bypass and make it more pedestrian friendly and a healthy place for our merchants and for our community. Downtown celebrations, it's part of the Local First, again, to stimulate local buying. Every dollar you spend locally recirculates in the economy instead of going off to Walmart or Safeway or somebody else. So shop local. This is the Wet Walk from a few years ago. There were, hundreds of people. And so come again on Sunday to the next Wet Walk, celebrating the new hospital. Well has had a whole series of local investment forums and business forums, and this was just a couple of them. We've been trying to promote more local entrepreneurs, and we still have funds available if any local entrepreneurs have a need for a little stimulus funding. It's called our Pay It Forward program. So some of the things you can do personally besides anything else you're already doing: buying local, growing your own food, or joining a CSA and shopping at the farmer's market. Or you can do all of those things. Conserving resources. Didn't put water, but that's obvious. Water, weatherizing, reusing, recycling, carpooling, etc. Whoops. Preparing for emergencies, having your supplies ready, being informed and volunteering when you can. Joining Well and or other groups. There are many other groups involved, and this is the ones I could think of. And Little Lake Grange, as I said, is one of the really wonderful partnering in localization and supporting our farm community. Another one I wanted to point out was the Community Rights Network down there in the lower right, because that formed about a year ago. We had some guest speakers, we had Democracy School, and now it is a countywide movement with Measure S on the ballot. Please vote yes on Measure S. So let's weave our community together. All those organizations are all working towards the same wonderful goal. And these were some of the things we did just this year. We had a Cuba presentation, the Waterwise Gardening Forum, which, by the way, I think is available on the Channel 3 website, and very interesting stuff about how you can grow food and still do it with very minimal water. The Saving Water, Energy, and Money had to do partly with the PACE program, but also all sorts of other ways you can improve your home for energy efficiency and water efficiency. We helped co-sponsor the Candidates Forum. We had our annual garden tour. This celebration right here, and we are co-sponsoring Will Tuttle, who wrote The World Peace Diet. That's on November 9th. And very important, November 16th, 1 month from tonight, is our annual potluck, and we would love to have you come and contribute your ideas as well as some food and break bread together and build energy for next year and the next 10 years of Well. Join, if you didn't already, over there at that table, and grab yourself one of our DVDs that you can look at home.
Thanks, Madge. That's wonderful. Let's give her a hand for that. I
was just going to say also, I'd love to have this slideshow go out to places that aren't necessarily the already converted. So if you know of any organizations or classrooms or whatever, it's available.
So we're going to move on to, I know you're waiting for the cake. So thank you for sticking with us till the cake. So I just want to remind you all that these, all of these displays and beautiful archived materials you see around the room are showing what's been happening in the last 10 years. And Richard Jorgensen has taken great care of all of this and takes a special joy in sharing it with you tonight. It came out of boxes. Let's give him a big hand. Richard. Take some time to look at these materials before they go back into boxes. It's really rare to see them in this room. I'm thrilled to see how many films we've shown and, you know, just all of the work of everyone here in this room. So many people have contributed to make these events happen. So we're going to give everybody about 2 minutes to speak, and there are some special people I really want to make sure speak on a few topics. So Brian Korzelius, are you still here? He's hiding in the back. Brian, please come up because Brian really was the round peg in a round hole for the Energy Committee, and I know he's shy and has been up on his property for years, but Brian, can you just come say a word so people can see what you look like? Brian really almost single-handedly wrote all of these energy reports and the Common Sense booklet. I mean, we all contributed a little bit, us Energy Committee people, David Drell and Richard and several others, but there's Brian right there being shy. I met Brian and I went, this man has a brain the size of a planet. This is so great. And he's a chemist and he does all these things and he just really helped our whole science part of our need base 10 years ago when we were trying to figure out, well, how much energy do we use? How much gas do people in Willits buy? You know, what's going on with how we heat our houses and how much is it costing and where's all that money going? So Brian and our Energy Committee helped us with that. I'm kind of stuck here.
Annie always needs to be unraveled. I'm not going to say much except that I'm glad Wells still is around. I think there's a very important need for it. I think it's very important to keep your focus on your goals, not your successes. And I would also like to thank all the people, and I have a list somewhere in my pocket or somewhere, but there were umpteen people involved in the energy research. It wasn't me, I simply collated the information. As David Drell pointed out earlier, it was a lot of people. So thank you for continuing.
Do you remember any of the statistics, Brian? Any of the stats we found out? How many gallons of gasoline or whatever? Well, it's huge anyway. Yes?
I just looked it up the other day, and thanks to the Energy Committee, it was all in a booklet, that the Willits area, the 95490 area, spends $30 million annually on imported energy.
Gasoline, liquid fuel budget, a football-sized tank, 15 feet deep.
Football field.
A football field-sized tank, area 15 feet deep, a pool. It's the liquid fuel diet, yearly liquid fuel diet of Willits.
And when we talk about Willits, we're talking about the 95490 area code, 13,000 people that live in our ambient area here, our watershed. So I'd like to call up another special person. That would be Diane Smalley, who really was a key person and maybe the only person in our wellness and health group, and she is still doing amazing things in Willits. You want to tell us in 2 minutes about the last 10 years?
I was very fortunate because I went to my old computer, the one I don't use very much, and sure enough, I had all the notes that I'd taken from back then, and we had a panel discussion, and on there I have the wellness group, we didn't really get quite to doing the inventory that Jason wanted us to do. I think wellness, being as it involves personal relationships, it's a little different. It's not like energy. You can't really inventory that so much. And so we really focused on creating some systems that would help people to connect. And the purpose, it's kind of long, but the purpose that we came up for with we eventually formed something called the Willits Wellness Network. I wanted to call it Wellits, but that didn't go over. And so we started meeting in about 2005, and the purpose that we came up, the purpose statement was that to promote community health during the transition to a steady local economy and beyond. We are concerned with emergency care, holistic wellness, and long-term health on all levels through education, research, production of local medicines, integration of conventional and traditional methods, and local healthcare network review and referral. We continued to meet till about 2008, somewhere in there, and then there was sort of a lack of involvement for a while there. But then now we've got something here in Willits called the Avenues to Wellness. And one of the projects that we had, which I'm really proud of, was the Medicine Chest Garden. It was a brainchild of Donna DeTerra, who's here. She came up with a simple concept of having about 8 herbs that anyone could grow outside their door. We planted a few of those, and I understand it's continuing to happen with Michelle Cummins here at the Grange. Now what we have here in Willits, which is really exciting, is the Howard Foundation and some other folks have created the Avenues to Wellness program. We sponsor a monthly speaker series, and there's a beautiful website, avenuestowellness.org. We've enrolled several restaurants in a program to serve a low-calorie, high-nutrient dish. We have about 38 practitioners here in town that are listed on the site, and some of us even give a discount if you buy a little card. So we're still practicing healthcare, and as we become more and more independent with that and more integrated, with our healthcare community, I think that will help us all. So.
And Jed, who left, it should be mentioned, and the walks are continuing to this day, as you've heard. And Kristen Bradford helped start the walks and was part of the wellness group. And so our next speaker, I just want to say a few words about her, is a Renaissance woman who does a lot of things really well, and which is that. So over there are 2 huge boards and a table filled with the most beautiful posters. I'm just always awed every month at her poster designs. Marilyn Businger, who knows how to make videos, and come on, Marilyn, and is not even going to talk about any of this movie stuff now. She's going to talk about food and the Grateful Gleaners. But please take a look at Marilyn's poster designs. I think they're totally worth saving. In fact, people do steal them off the bulletin boards before the event. So there. Okay, Marilyn. This is Marilyn.
Right. Thanks. Okay. I was told I have 2 minutes. Okay, the Grateful Gleaners grew out of, I was in Diane's group, but I got into the Grateful Gleaning group right from the start. But the people who started it were Karen Gridley and Sarah O'Brien, and 3 who have moved to different places now, Laura Liska, Esther Faber, and Marilyn Darrow. So they started this group looking around and seeing all the food that went to waste everywhere, really. In developed nations, food goes to waste, and figured out, okay, how can we possibly move this food off the trees, off the ground, whatever, to people who needed it, to people, to eat food. So that's how the Grateful Gleaners were born. And what we do is we try to locate people who have a tree or an orchard or a garden or anything to contribute for us to pick. And the food that we pick, we keep a little bit of it for ourselves, but we contribute literally something like 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of food a year. Our banner year was there was about 5,000 pounds one year. There's a group of us at the core, but we get volunteers, and a number of you have volunteered and picked food for people in the community. So who are the people? The food bank, our Daily Bread, which is our soup kitchen at St. Anthony's, the after-school programs, the senior centers. Some of it has gone up to Laytonville. Some of it has gone out to the coast, to Fort Bragg. We have people that work in these places and have taken food elsewhere. Sometimes when we have more than really can be eaten, it will be processed. And for instance, last year I was able to sell for donations enough apple cider. And before I forget, I want to thank the Parches. They're not here tonight, but they have allowed us to use their really nice pressing setup to create the apple cider. But I was able to get donations to the tune of about $170 to turn over. I split it between the food bank and our Daily Bread. So even when there's, somehow the food gets out there and the people that need the help get it. So, and one more thing, we don't have to do all the picking. If you have some food that you've got too much of, just take it over to the food bank. We're trying to get people to do that. We are not the only people that should be doing this. Everybody should. You got excess, take it to somebody who needs it.
Thank you, Marilyn.
You're welcome.
So I noticed there's one person at the back, Kimball Dodge, who's very humble, standing at the back of the room. She's been a grateful gleaner and very involved in the Gleaners. And just about every group that has been happening, Kimball's there, making things happen and putting up posters. Let's give Kimball a huge hand. Kimball! There's a lot of people who aren't here that I would have loved to have talked to us. There's a lot of groups that we had and projects that we started, and of course you can see from the boards. The shelter group didn't really get very well off the ground, although we had co-housing meetings. A few different groups met for co-housing meetings. We talked about co-housing. When it came to putting money on the table, everyone kind of melted away, but intentional community and co-housing is still something that really needs to happen for all age groups, multi-generational housing. So please think of that as something that if you're personally interested in. I know that a lot of my friends are moving in, end of Suburbia, end of Brook Trails, end of, not the end, but they're coming into town, and we need to create housing for ourselves in town. So think of that as a really important new project. I see Liam, who was our office manager for a couple of years. Liam, thank you for all your work and help. And there's Mary Zelichild, who's been amazing. She wrote column after column about food for years in the Nickel and Dime and in the Willits News, and she's just a great journalist, really good writer. There's Mary Zelichild, also a humble person. Put your hand up, Mary. Anyway, Candace Corzelius there, also a gleaner. And Candace, you're a gleaner. You didn't raise your hand, right? She's humble too. Everyone's humble except me. I'm standing up here. So we had all these great ideas and these great groups, and a lot of amazing projects came out from that. I'm going to brag about the Now and Then film series. Has shown well over 100 movies monthly for the last 9 years, and you can see the results of that with Marilyn's posters over there. We want to keep showing movies. At first, there were no movies to show. We had to dig into Richard's old VHS archive and show things about Bucky Fuller and Oroville in India. And then all of a sudden, movies started being made, and it was just like coming thick and fast, The Real Dirt on Farmer John, and all these amazing movies just started rolling out of the indie groups about food and energy and the Who Killed the Electric Car, all kinds of movies. So please ask us to show more movies. Tell us what movies you want to see. And borrow these movies from the Main Street Music. He's done a good job, Pete has, of trying to have a big well section there. I think it's only $1 to get those movies and see them. They're really amazing indie productions. Richard has spent 10 years organizing this event. Most recently, several months, our dining room was completely fragged with these beautiful archives that you see here, and he's really a great guy and one of the best humans I know. Richard, after that introduction, you want to say anything?
What can I say after that? Transportation was kind of my focus and still is. And of course, I dream of a better day where we're going to have rail connections other than the skunk train departing and arriving in Willits. So to that end, there's a nice display over in the corner there, and I'd be happy to talk with anyone about that afterwards. I just wanted to share the microphone a little bit with Mr. Kotler here, who wanted to say something about radio station, an opportunity that is at hand with a window of opportunity here.
About 10 years ago, I learned about low-power FM stations and wanted to bring one to Willits. Couldn't make it happen. And then about 5 years ago, through the Grange, Tim Rice, Roger Dickey caught fire with the idea of having an LPFM station. For a couple of years, we tried to get it off the ground. We didn't do it. But the window was closing on the LPFM ability to get licenses. And so after everything died, I just quietly applied, and a miracle happened. We got a license. We got a channel. We have built a little studio in this place, but I am no longer able to carry this on, and so I want to put this out to you tonight to see if there's any interest in people putting a small, low-power FM station together. If you have an idea about how you'd like to see such a thing go, I have a lot of them. I'll be glad to share them with you. Get in touch with me. That's not too hard. So an LPFM station, 100 watts, it'll only reach this town. That's it.
And I think we should also acknowledge Annie for all of her wonderful work. not only organizing this, very, very active in the Grange, she's also done cooking classes and the reskilling sewing classes, and she's like another Renaissance woman here and just done lots of wonderful work. Thank you so much, Annie. Well, as long as it's short, it's fine.
But it has to do with food. The Willits Environmental Center is very grateful to Well and to Save Our Little Lake Valley. I mean, the three groups have been invaluable source of support and camaraderie, and you know, through this painful 2 years while we've watched this terrible thing happen to Willits, the bypass, the thing that, you know, the specter that was the thing that we wanted to avoid so much, especially when Well was formed. You know, that was the monster we were hoping Willits could avoid. But anyway, thanks to Well and to Solve, the Environmental Center was able to slog on.
All right. One other little image that was mentioned when we were brainstorming about Well's role in all of these diverse things that are happening out there is the idea of the mycelium. And a forest isn't just a bunch of separate trees. They all connect. They all communicate with each other. They all help each other. They actually share resources. So this fact that we have all these different groups that all take a piece of this action, and we're all really working together like mycelium. So with that, I want to also mention that I'm very thankful to our two local bakers who have made fabulous cake. Marlena River has made a decadent chocolate cake, and Yvonne Wagonette has made a spelt flour, I believe it's a carrot cake. And so let's sing happy birthday and celebrate. Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday, dear Willits. Happy birthday to you.
Come and get some cake and walk around the room, see the archives, visit with each other, and enjoy the rest of this evening together. Thanks everyone for coming.
I would like to thank Al Rosen and Andy Wright for videoing this event, and also for the work that they did putting together the excerpts, and for many, many other videos. They also have the one from the Waterwise Gardening and many other Well events. So thank you, Andy and Al.